like the establishment Republicans don't like Trump. There's this like schism in the Republican Party between like sort of like populist wing, the Trumpy wing, and like the establishment wing. They came around to him after it became clear that he was like sort of useful in a particular way, but he was just like bull they tried to keep on a leash to be useful in particular areas, but they didn't want to let him loose and just destroy everything.
All right, boys, let's get into it. So we're in our politics episode, and we are for sure going to run politics today. We're going to do a little recap on the elections, which are, the results are still coming in, but I think there's some things we can glean from it. Maybe we can talk about how it affects our money.
Definitely some takeaways.
Yeah, I think there's enough takeaways where it deserves discussion. And shout out to all of our international audience members. We know this doesn't impact you directly, but maybe you still find it useful.
And impact the funds.
Yes, it could impact the funds. So let's talk about where we sit now. So today is Wednesday, November 9th. It is around 5 p.m. on the West Coast. And as of right now, results are still coming in the U.S. House. No one has won the majority. You need 218 to win the majority. GOP sits at 207, and 184 is where the Dems sit. Right now, the forecast is like there will be a narrow victory for the Republicans. We'll talk about
that's surprising.
That's
right?
a shock, and so we'll talk about why that's a shock. In the Senate, obviously you need 50 plus one. Well, the Republicans need 51 to have a majority, and the Dems just need 50 because Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker currently. So right now it's 48-48. It looks like this Warnock-Walker runoff in the Georgia Senate seat, which will take place on December 6th, is going to be potentially the decider in who has the majority in the Senate.
Damn. Did we see that coming?
I think
the Senate was supposed to be close.
Either way.
The
it was going to
Senate
be close.
was a difficult map this year for Republicans. I think it's actually quite good for them in 2024. But they were supposed to red wave the hell out of the House, and there was a good chance of them taking the Senate. I think they were favored.
I was looking at Nate Silver's numbers, and it looked like it was going to be a complete landslide.
He would always come in. I think this is part of the drinking game. Like when Nate Silver reminds everyone he doesn't make predictions, he makes probabilistic, outcomes.
A way to absolve himself from any outcome.
Yeah, that was part of the drinking game. What was also part of the drinking game? It was like anytime someone mentions democracy itself is on the ballot. There were a few other...
Democracy is on the ballot.
Yeah, and anytime someone draws some random object around the state of Pennsylvania, you also drink.
Wait, so is Pennsylvania settled or?
Fetterman beat Oz.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about why that
was Oz. I am so lost.
Yes, Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz
ran
was
for
running.
Senate.
Oh,
So
wow.
you remember, Dr. Oz got to start from Oprah. And Oprah launched his stardom. He started his own show, and he was actually like basically selling all kinds of pills on the backside of his like... he was saying Garcinia Cambogia would like help weight loss.
Garcinia Cambogia.
Anyway, there was like a whole stretch.
Did you guys ever dabble in any Cambogia?
Decline answer. No. I didn't personally, but I had several friends who made their net worth off of
this was the e-com.
His like pushing
business du jour.
of
right?
these
e-com is it's a generous way of labeling it.
Yeah, but I had several friends who made amounts of money off his like kind of like baseless claims on like this random ingredient will help you lose weight. And in any case, what was interesting in this case is I think 4 days ago, Oprah came out against Oz. She backed Fetterman. So I don't know if that tipped the scales or anything, but I do want to discuss a list of losers and winners with you, and we can kind of jump off from there.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, do you have any rapid fire takes you want to spit at me?
Yeah, I got a few, and then we can go wherever direction you guys want to go.
So I've been in the dark this whole time. This is going to be very informative for me. Like I'm very excited to hear this one because like I feel like I represent the majority of listeners. Like I just don't follow this as closely as you guys. So.
Yeah, I think that's most of the case, and we could talk about where this actually lands in our actual lives and our money. But
very good.
So Senate will be decided December 6th. Narrow GOP majority in the House. So losers. Number 1, Kevin McCarthy. is probably going to be the Speaker of the House. He's going to replace Nancy Pelosi, but he was really excited. I mean, I've met Kevin McCarthy. I've met
sorry,
him.
pleb question.
Yeah.
The first.
Sorry.
Pleb it up, baby.
So the Republicans won the House.
They are forecasted
Probably
to win
will.
the House, but by a narrow majority. I mean, typically, historically, when one side wins the White House in the midterms, historically, the House goes in the opposite direction. In the
Any
midterms.
reason for that? Or?
Of course, like you see these like actions that the White House of one party is making, and you want to change those because you
People
don't
just have
like because it obviously doesn't work out as planned, and so people go in the
general distain for the politics of the previous 2 years.
Obama
Interesting.
did, Trump did. I mean, there's like you go back in history and see, and so they kind of the Democrats defied history in this and not getting. And I'll take credit, take the blame here. Like I think I've mentioned several times in this podcast in the last year. I've said the Dems were going to get shellacked in the midterms, and
I thought it was going to be a red wave.
right, and it was not. So we need to discuss it. We need to come full circle and realize why. I think Ben Shapiro, notable conservative, said it turned from a red wave to a red wedding. I think it's a Game of Thrones situation where internally in the Republican Party, there's going to be some blood. So let me get through this list of losers. So Kevin McCarthy's a loser because like he was considered, he's been wanting to be the Speaker of the House for a long time. This is his path to power. He's personally wanted this for a long time. And now he's going to get it, but he's going to do it with a very thin majority, which means his power to launch investigations or hold people accountable or write bills, get law passed is very diminished now. He even, obviously he had to run for his own seat. He won. He's on the West Coast later in the night. His victory party was somewhat muted because while he won his House seat, he is not going to be a much more powerful Speaker of House than he thought. Second loser, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's, I think, I'll give you the shorthand version. Basically, the people he backed did not win. Specifically, his ones that he promoted most of the effort in. We're talking like.
Were these the extreme populists?
Yeah, I mean, I think the notable ones that people might know about are Herschel Walker and Mehmet Oz.
The common thread among all these people is that they really like Trump. It's not necessarily he just sort of like put people in there.
They bent the knee. They are election deniers, meaning like they believe that like Trump actually won the 2020 election. And anyway, so we'll talk about more about that. The other loser, I think, is Gavin Newsom. So what would have been good for Gavin Newsom is if the Dems did get demolished in these midterms, and he can make the case that Biden's policies, his just effort is not winning. It's not working. We need new blood. Also, the health age factor comes into play, which you'll still have. But in any case, I think he's a loser in this.
But Gavin Newsom was on the ballot. He won.
No.
Yeah, he was for governor. Yes.
Oh, he was?
Yes, he was.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, they.
It's how much of a non-event it is. I don't even remember it.
Yeah, I mean, in
won.
California, it's tough, and we'll talk about maybe we talk about our own personal voting stuff at some point.
Sure.
Winners, the Dems won. I mean, I think they defied what the historical averages are in terms of like not getting shellacked as I thought they were going to be in the House, and they, it's going to be a tight squeeze in the Senate. So, pretty good for them. Biden was a winner. Now, granted, there was this interesting dynamic for the Democrats who were running for office. There was this big separation from them and Biden, meaning if you are a Democrat in a contested election, you did not want Biden to come to your state, to your city, and campaign for you. You didn't want him to stump for you. You wanted to be like, no, this guy, like the economy's going down. His approval rating is like pretty far low on the scale.
Sure. He represents something of like a black hole for a moderate vote, honestly.
Exactly. And so what Biden ended up doing was he went to a lot of states where they were for sure going to win and stumped. And then he also did a lot of background fundraising, like private events. And so, someone either told him, I'm sure he noticed he was getting assigned to these things that didn't really matter. So he's a winner in that, as leader of the party, his party did well. So he could say, hey, I have a platform to run again in 2024. I think it's notable that most candidates still kept their distance from him, and that may be why they did well. Ron DeSantis, I think, is a winner because Trump's candidates did not do so well. He's a big winner. He also helped the GOP probably going to eke out a House majority because of his redistricting in Florida specifically, helped them eke out a few House
Are we talking
gerrymandering? Like literally drawing the lines around. Instead of having like 30% Democrats, there's
one of those
10%.
Golf claps you give them. Okay, yeah, nice.
Yeah, so if you're part of the GOP, the grand old party, you'd be like, hey, we didn't think that was a big deal back when you did that, but like, good job because you might have saved us the House. So, and then also Trump not really showing the weight he purports to have in the party as kingmaker, as like political leader of the Republican Party, gives DeSantis another +1. Also, the last winner of this loser-winner list, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has stated that he thinks that Trump's candidates are a problem that he selected. He thinks that the Republican Party has a candidate problem, and he could be proven right in this scenario that like the reason they didn't have a quote-unquote red wave is because they didn't select the right candidates.
I didn't know that Mitch McConnell was like outed to be sort of like against Donnie there.
Yeah, he's an establishment Republican, and like the establishment Republicans don't like Trump. There's this like schism in the Republican Party between like sort of like populist wing, the Trumpy wing, and like the establishment wing. They came around to him after it became clear that he was like sort of useful in a particular way, but he was just like bull. They tried to keep on a leash to be useful in particular areas, but they didn't want to let him loose and just destroy everything.
Sounds
right.
Right?
So I think Trump's an interesting part to like start off with this because, like,
can we just start off with talking about just like how big of a fail this just is by the Republicans? I mean, this is the absolute disaster.
You had everything you wanted.
You had a president with a 41% approval rating who is not even alive.
41% approval is low by historical standards. Am I right?
It's like Trump levels of approval, right? Like it's unbelievably low. Inflation, economy, like all these issues we're in wars. Like you could not tee this
just
up
by
better.
Looking at him for like 2 seconds.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
But it's interesting how his political place, you call it buying votes, but like releasing the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, to get gas prices down in the short term might have actually worked.
I think it had nothing to do with this.
Okay.
Honestly, I think this is just like. I think you can parse the results and like you see like a rejection of like Trump, and you see like DeSantis won by 20 points. And all of Trump's candidates, Blake Masters might pull it out in Arizona, but pretty much all of these guys got like absolutely shellacked. And even like guys who won, like JD Vance, like, yeah, JD Vance won, they like won by a few points in like what should be like an unbelievably red area in an election that should be like super red wavy.
So there were scenarios where the Republican governor won by, let's say, 20 points, but like the Republican House or Senate seat won by like a point, and that's considered a failure. Meaning Trump didn't back Brian Kemp, but he backed a Congress member, and they did not even come close. So when you would like to see that like the person that the leader of the party backs wins above par to what the, say governor wins or loses.
That's another good point. I forgot about Kemp because like Trump and Kemp went at it in the elections. Kemp was involved with the whole vote counting thing in Georgia.
Was he the Secretary of State of Georgia at the time, or no?
So.
Or no, that was
I don't know.
The guy whose last name sounds like Roethlisberger.
I forgot his exact position. But yeah, like Trump was like shitting on him basically this whole time, and Kemp kind of just gave him like an FU, like I've been a great governor, I've done all these things, like I don't care like about you, and people voted for him like hard. He ran against Stacey
Abrams, who's darling of the Democratic Party and got quite the funding amount.
Yes, she herself had some issues with her election. The loss of the election.
I like alluded to that he was Secretary of State. He was governor of Georgia during this time. Okay. So, he was a big FU to Trump, and he demolished Stacey Abrams. So the idea is that like, is there a shift in the Republican Party where, Trump was previously the kingmaker, but also supplying a lot of money to these candidates and stumping for them. And then even though he's done that, they didn't have the red wave. So now are the establishment saying, do we need a new leader? Like Trump said in a week, so I think it's like November 15th, he's going to make a big announcement at Mar-a-Lago. He's probably going to announce that he's running for president.
I don't think he's announcing he's running for president.
I think he is.
I don't think he's announcing.
All right.
So it's going to be a big announcement next week.
Big announcement, he says. He's probably going to run, I think. And the thing is that DeSantis can't necessarily announce. I don't think he would announce like a week after he wins the governor's office.
Yeah, I doubt it.
So Trump, if he does announce, he's going to have this 5 to 6 month period where he's going to have the share of voice. And he's going to have the chance to like make his case to the core of the Republican Party to say like, hey, maybe we didn't win, but he might say like, still believe in me, come along with me, support me. I don't think that the Republican I forget what the RNC essentially is necessarily wants to back him in this case. I don't think they given him the behind the door handshake.
Do you think that like the results that are just coming in are representative of the fact of your conclusion here? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think like it's like a reckoning for the Republican Party. Like Steven said, they had everything set up for them on a platter, and they did not, showcase this. And maybe it's because Trump and his candidates that he picked did not really provide them the path. So maybe they had time to go with new blood. And I mean, I think personally between the three of us, do we really want to see Biden-Trump again? I don't think any of us really want to see that.
I feel like literally nobody wants
No one wants to see that.
There's not a single person I know that wants to see that except for like
hardcore.
I don't want to call them retards, but like,
Okay, redacted.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I think Trump's probably not going to announce he's running, because it's kind of a weird momentum thing right now after he kind of lost a little bit.
But he announced it before these elections.
The other thing, though, is that he's right now using this sort of fundraising thing to support himself. As soon as he declares, I think there's all these like restrictions and everything on how he can spend the money and stuff like that. Whereas right now he can basically, he has like all these donations that he can use to like fund jets and like whatever he wants. And I kind of think he's like enjoying just like having other people like.
But he can
pay
do
for
that
stuff
better
like
when
that.
he's running for president, no?
No, he can't, because like there's all these there's basically no restrictions
on him now.
He's just got like a piggy bank right now. And then there's a question of like, is Truth Social like an in-kind donation? There's like all this complexity I think that arises when he declares. And I'm not sure there's a benefit to him declaring. Really, I don't know.
What about that as a legal strategy for him? Because like as president, do these?
Oh.
I think he will run. I just don't think he'll do it yet.
You don't want to say he's going to announce yet. A pleb question, the second, and I'll just keep going with these as I think of them. Okay, so we had an episode on Ron DeSantis while you were traveling through Europe, and that episode was enlightening for me. I was like, okay, well, this guy sounds like he might be pretty politically savvy, as well as traditionally smart. Was he like a Harvard guy and whatever? If Trump decides to run or not, is DeSantis pretty certain, like in your minds, that he is going to be a Republican candidate?
Oh yeah, he for sure will. And,
so like this,
and there will be more than two.
So
it will not be Trump DeSantis. There will be like I think it's gonna be a whole swath of them.
Yeah, there's always
It's
like
gonna
a
be
panel.
full clown car.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so there's a clown car, but like DeSantis just went into a vote, and that's just sort of for show at this point.
Well,
like,
he had to run for governor again, and he had a chance of 2 more years.
it like helps his case to be like reelected, like
for sure. Like
okay.
I think he has to like have a job first to like
to like
have his standing.
show the party.
It'd
Like,
be weird if he just left. And
like
then 2
everybody
years later
wants
came back.
me,
Yeah,
but I'm not going to take it.
but also there's been rumors that he's running for president, and he also won heavily. He won, resoundingly, and I don't. Haven't dug into his like personal policies or like the state policies much, but I do think he has backing enough to primary well. I don't know if he's going to win against Trump. I mean, I don't know. Like there's a few other.
Trump's a good competitor. Bottom line,
He's a good. If if elections and running for office is like a stage, like Trump is an experienced like actor and comedian.
He's
like
a-
DeSantis's brain doesn't
Trump's
really matter
like a 10
as
out of
much.
10 at that skill, like performing on the stage of that debate.
Yes,
Like,
and Trump he's much funnier than DeSantis. Like he's kind of a funny guy, say what you will about him, and he's definitely got charisma. I know he's like complete anathema to a lot of people, but like he's definitely got a sort of thing about him, right? That when you put him next to somebody like Jeb Bush just looks like a total loser.
there's a reason
Right,
why
that was one of the
there's a
reasons
reason
why
he became president.
He won. Like he just on stage, he just looked like the guy ultimately in all those.
Yeah.
debates.
I mean, I think it will come down to, can the reasonable American say, well, I can get the same policies without the bullshit and without the like obvious self aggrandizement and enrichment and possible impeachable offenses, and not saying that doesn't go on with other presidents, but just like the obviousness of it all and the distractions it causes to like moving the Republican Party forward. I think like,
Well, I hope that's true, and it seems like the midterm elections are indicative of that sentiment.
right,
Well,
he didn't
well,
have as much sway as he would have liked. For
I
sure.
don't think these parties have a good history of doing things that like they should do. It seems like both parties just love shooting themselves in like both feet simultaneously and just tripping over themselves. It's really quite remarkable.
I think it does come down to some of these critical PACs and the RNC of like, who are they going to put the money behind closed doors? Are they going to say, DeSantis, like we're going to help you in the primary, and also we're more likely to put the money behind you than Trump, because like Trump is not the 10-year, 20-year plan for the Republican Party, but maybe someone like DeSantis is,
I'm sorry,
or Nikki Haley, or
help me
Mike
understand
Pompeo.
what's still at large, like what's still in play. Is there something that like hasn't come in yet that we're still
Like
contested on?
people who may come in.
votes that are and like how
Yes.
that affects.
There's
So
like
Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia are
those are the three.
yeah. And
Senate.
there's like basically a 2-seat kind of gap.
those are
between-
like our swing.
So those are the
states.
swing states. Those will ultimately decide
Yeah.
like, who has control. Of
You got who's on the Democrat side in Arizona? He was the ex-astronaut,
Mark Kelly.
Mark Kelly. And then you got Silicon Valley backed, or maybe I shouldn't say Peter Thiel backed Blake Masters. He wrote a lot of good Thiel notes on Thiel's class, which I read. But I don't know.
Damn,
his-
that guy just started from writing Teal notes and then rose to that seat.
yeah, I mean, you got a multi-billion-dollar backer. Like that's all you really need in politics to
Wow.
elevate to the level that you need, because people will feed you the angle
Teal just doesn't want to run himself, but he's like, of
course not.
you do it.
because he knows that's dumb.
But Nigger Bonnie, you kind of still want to.
No,
do
I
it.
never said that. Never said that. But like, as a candidate, if you can raise money, people will feed you the policies that you need. Like you don't need to like have all the ideas yourself. You just need to like read the notes and say the lines.
They're all actors, so
Yeah,
it's like
I
it's
mean-
no shock that like Ronald Reagan
Repeat
or Donald
the
Trump
line.
made
I mean, yeah, good point. Ronald Reagan, repeat the line.
Repeat the line.
End
of quote.
So anyway, I think what we'll see is, and what I thought also was interesting is that, we talked about, I think on the last podcast that, and maybe the money one of this week, we talked about how midterm elections tend to be 3, 6, and 12 months out positive for the
Bullish.
market, bullish
Bullish.
for the market. But
Yeah.
today we saw the S&P down 2%. And I don't know if that was because of ambiguity, meaning things weren't decided, or was that because the Republicans did not make as much as a big accomplishment as that people thought, so that we'd have a split government, meaning like in general, the decision that they need to be made are split between Republicans and Democrats. And
So
like we're kind of
my
locked.
understanding was that the expectation was a split government going into the election. I mean, was that not correct?
There
Like,
is a difference between a split government in that, like, there's a Democrat and then there's an entire Congress controlled by one party versus Congress itself is split. Like when you own all of Congress, you have a lot of leverage, right? Like you can pass bills and send them to Biden and then get him to not sign particular things and be like, why didn't you sign the
right, you can pressure the
no
president to be
dead
like,
babies
"This is your
act,"
fault,
you know?
Joe."
Yeah,
Right, yeah,
like,
yeah.
and you can assert like a lot of you can do investigations. You can assert leverage in a lot of ways. When Congress is split, like you can't really get those bills to the desk at all. You have less investigative
Joe
power.
Manchin, which we talked about before Alfalfa started on Armand's podcast Flow, he would become essentially the most powerful person in Biden's presidency because there was such a thin majority in the Senate that the most moderate people actually become the most powerful, which he is a moderate Democrat. He's a Democrat senator from West Virginia, and he's kind of down the middle. And so is West Virginia itself. I think he even came out and just eviscerated Biden on like coal plants. And
West Virginia is pretty red. It's like super red.
Yes,
I'm
but
shocked
he
that
won
it
as a
was blue at
Democrat.
all,
He
to be
won as a
honest.
He
Democrat.
did. He's like one of these old school.
What do you
kind
call
of
them? Not blue dogs.
Blue collar? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but like he's
Rhinos?
like pro.
It's
he-
an important
he's
terminology.
Like
'cause
he's pro gun. He's pro coal. Like
it's an important terminology because I feel like that's a very rare breed.
Right, and as radical moderates, and then this whole idea, like I think we would like this might be kind of what we wish for. This might be the happy medium that we want, which is both houses. The moderates are the most powerful because when it comes to the extremes, they have to convince the moderates to vote because there's only one or two votes to make a bill pass.
Swing anything, yeah.
Right. So if Kevin McCarthy wants to pass a bill, and even though he knows Joe Biden won't sign it, if he just wants to make a statement, he's going to need the moderate Republicans to sign on board. So this may be good in that it actually, forces compromise.
Well, Stephen, how do you feel about that comment with in the framework of knowing that like having a split government usually ends in gridlock, not necessarily in terms of like progressive sort of movements?
I don't know. I think it's nuanced what happens here. I think some things are pretty obvious to me. I think the first thing that's obvious to me is that this is like super bullish, like energy, but like in a bad way, because I just think like the left in this country is like very anti like new energy.
Definitely.
There's this like delusion that we're going to get to like this place of clean, sustainable, zero emission energy within like 5 or 10 years. And it's like absolute nonsense. It's a complete pipe dream. Like we're probably like 30 years away from being able to do that. And in the meantime, we have to develop supply.
So all of these like performative efforts to boycott, they're all well intentioned is how I view them. But it's like just rationally
I don't doubt that these people have good intentions or that they believe, like they truly believe what they're saying. But what they're saying is like kind of nonsense.
It's like
sometimes.
directionally correct, but like just come on, be rational about how long it's going to take.
I think on the whole, we want the same thing. Like we
Yes.
want to be
Yes.
full sustainable energy, but like we also recognize at the same time, the battery technology does not exist to store sustainable energy. You're talking wind, solar, other methods to store the energy that you need when those forms of energy creation do not exist, aka at night when the wind's not blowing. And we're pro-nuclear, but for some reason nuclear doesn't qualify. And at the same time, we recognize that technology is not ready. We think we should still invest in it, but we also think it's somewhat immoral to deny Americans, as the largest oil producer in the world, that we don't incentivize investment in this to give our citizens access to cheap baseload energy, whether that's gasoline in their cars or for factories in the U.S., which we're trying to bolster. We're trying to make manufacturing good again in America, and they need cheap baseload energy. And, manufacturing in Germany, as an example, is going to fucking crater because, the energy that they're getting is going to be non-existent and or expensive. And we're going to see the manufacturing decline in Germany, and we're trying to get manufacturing up. So we're just in this like weird middle where like we believe the same thing, but it's like, well, let's get down to like brass tacks and talk about when is this actually capable.
So I know I was just in Europe, right? I was just in Italy staying with a friend, and they were like excited that temperatures were still riding high through October, November, because they're like, thank goodness we don't have to like run our heater right now, because like this would be unsustainably expensive for us.
Were you worried at all when you were traveling Europe that you were going to get no AC in your Airbnbs or like anything like that?
Honestly, I felt guilt when I stayed at a friend's house and I dried my clothes because I was like, is this like
Could have cost them $300
prohibitive to you? I was actually like, I had that sort of empathy, but like I still did it. But in my mind, I was like, oh shit. Like I had an oh shit moment where I was like, oh damn. Like, does this bother you?
And we talked about this in the Money podcast just a few days ago. Like we think that, energy might be a good play if the recession doesn't just demolish demand. So we'll talk maybe more in future podcasts about how to play this. Anyway, any other thoughts on like the election and how this might affect our bags in particular?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the bags go, I think this is bullish for energy prices, which is not great for inflation, not great for the economy,
Not great
possibly
not great for stonks, not great for cryptos.
possibly bad for for bond yields. Like I think all of these things are kind of negative in the short run.
And the move today represents that. S&P's down 2.5%.
2%.
2%.
Nasdaq's
down
Nasdaq's down 2.5%. Crypto's down.
I think
Crypto's
generally,
dead.
I think generally, yeah. What are we down? 20%. I think generally speaking, like there are problems with both the D's and the R's. Like I to throw the D's a bone. Like I don't think this is like a period of time where we want to be walking around with like balanced budgets and like that, like tax cuts and that sort of thing either. Like I don't think, I think society will collapse if we do that. So that's not good. I think we do need a lot of government investment and stuff. It's just they're investing in a lot of the wrong things. So it's kind of a complicated picture moving forward.
From a crypto perspective, first of all, SBF going down means his his prized legislation is likely going to go down.
Right, his
him.
political points.
Right, I think his credibility in Washington is already
Was there
evaporated.
anybody in particular that he was like buddy with that like?
I didn't look at where his donations went or where like the organization that FTX is a part of went, but I think like his legislation that he was lobbying for behind the scenes is kind of dead on arrival. But what I was hoping for was that maybe Republicans would win enough where they could hold Gary Gensler specifically accountable. I think like in the short term, he's the one that needs to be held accountable. And whether they can tie him up with investigations or accountability is properly important, because the Democrats have not. Surprisingly, you would think that out of anyone, they would be holding him most accountable, because you have a technology that has the most amount of transparency in the financial system versus our traditional banking system, which has very little transparency. You would think that they would hold him accountable to making sure that there was a regulatory clarity. And actually, I'll touch on my thought in a second. But like, I was hoping that there would be enough Republican power to hold him accountable, and maybe some of the people that the crypto industry backed would be there. We'll see if that ends up being the case. I do think that FTX going down, does cause some issues for the crypto industry. So we'll see where it flies.
How about one of our Discord users who created this website called cryptorumors.io, who was following sort of the idea that you had
sentiment.
The sentiment. Like you had posited this idea ages ago that said, like, how about we measure political candidates based on their crypto sentiment? And this Discord user of ours, I wouldn't attribute his like website to us, but he had done it. He collected like Twitter posts and etc. And he had like created this website that measured how these candidates all feel. Like, was there any candidates that you saw that you were excited to see win their specific elections that are like, oh my God, this is actually bullish for crypto?
I don't know if there are enough one-issue voters for crypto that actually make an impact. Like if you watch mainstream media, it literally showed up 0 times. It wasn't mentioned. The main things were the economy and abortion. Like that overtook everything else. So I don't know if one-issue voters for crypto have made it. And I still think, an NRI-style website, which we talked about in the Discord, where there's like literally an A through F rating on these people, and you can very quickly see, like, does my House of Representative, how it has he or she voted, and what is the sentiment in their public statements?
Right, and how does it align with my view on crypto? I think over a longer period of time, that certainly carries
For sure.
more weight.
Today, as we're down 20, 30%, I don't know how much power we wield.
Crawling their Twitter now is not going to be too informative because crypto is not that prominent.
Yeah, I will bring up a thing that came up from, I forget his name, but the CEO of Circle, which manages USDC, and then also Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase. He said, the reason that we have issues like FTX is because the U.S. has not provided enough regulatory clarity for companies like FTX to base in the U.S. and follow the rules, because there has been no rule outline set where they feel comfortable with, basing their bank accounts, their operations in the U.S. So they've been forced overseas where there is literally no regulation in terms of what kind of transparency they need to provide, what they need to do with customer funds. And you compare that with Coinbase, which Brian Armstrong looks pretty good right now in terms of...
Oh, for not dying, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he just has to survive at this point.
Right, just
and
don't fuck up, and
as
you're going to be a saint.
U.S. regulated, U.S. publicly traded company, he has to undergo audits, and also as a publicly traded company, their customer deposits are open to understand where that money goes.
Especially when, let's just call FTX taken over by a Chinese business. Like, can you imagine what the regulators will do to that entity? Like, they're going to side on Coinbase's, wherever they can, they're going to side on Coinbase's side to be like, no, you are anointed, not this Chinese entity. Like, there's no question.
I think both the CEO of Circle and Coinbase were in Thailand for some kind of event, or they were together physically in the same area for an event, a conference. Maybe it was Japan. Sorry, it was Japan. And I think maybe they quickly huddled and said, what is our talking points here? And Brian Armstrong went on the Bankless live stream, which everyone should check out if you want to know the play-by-play of what happened with this Binance FTX mess. And they had the same message, which was the reason this happened is because there's not regulatory clarity in the U.S. And they were just dialed on this thing.
I mean,
and I like this argument because it does make sense to me, and it also provides a path for like
sort of like their version of strong lobbying without paying the dollars.
Yeah, and they're also not dunking on losers. They're just like, hey, if the U.S. wants to win, if you want to protect U.S. consumers, this is the best way to do this. So anyway, I think that's an interesting take that could be taken from this random coincidence of FTX going down in these midterms, that there is a kind of like a regulatory need that can solve some of these issues we're seeing. Also, we have to do a better job of like communicating what is DeFi and what is not DeFi, because I think outside of our circles and maybe the listeners of this podcast circles, they obviously lumped us in with DeFi.
Can I bring it back to a bit of a spicier topic, like Donnie Trump? So we're split here. You guys, one of you thinks that he's going to announce that he's running. One of you thinks he's maybe going to run, but not going to announce in the next 2 weeks. Do you think that him running or winning the presidential election would be beneficial to our bags, our risk assets, our stonks, our cryptos?
Yeah, he's like, I mean, he loves stonks. Like, I don't know how much he loves crypto, but he loves stonks. Like, if he announced he were running and the Republicans kind of had control of the House and everything, like, I think that would be very bullish for stocks.
Do you think that, like,
just purely in that frame?
Yeah, sort of see that playing out as well. But what about the Florida governor as well, DeSantis? Do you think like he would have the same effect?
Same thing. I think.
Same effect.
I think Republicans in general are going to probably be a little more bullish for the stock market moving forward, but like not something I super base a lot of stuff on, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good for real estate holders in general. Like the TCJA, essentially the 2017 Trump tax cuts, heavily benefit real estate holders. You got to accelerate a massive amount of depreciation. So like all the cash flow I've received from these apartment complexes, storage units, like I'm not going to pay taxes on these for a while because of the depreciation, which exists for a reason. But the accelerated depreciation that his tax bill provided was, I think, abnormal. But it also was specifically targeted towards these economic opportunity zones, which I think is a great program. They particularly zoned off areas of the American country that needed investment,
stimulating development.
Yeah, that part was good. So anyway, I think it's good for real estate holders. Stocks, I still think the cost of money and the amount of money, which is determined by the Fed, is more important. But you could see his version of populism giving back to people. Maybe there's a fiscal stimulus that he like sees that people are more open to now because, the seal's been broken and he understands how that like plays into the market and pumping asset prices and also keeping people happy. He might really play into this fiscal stimulus idea.
How about the results of this election affecting the vote of the presidential election between not Trump and DeSantis, but like Biden and a Republican candidate?
This election, even though it was super bearish for Republicans in the short run, is actually super bullish for them in the long run. Like the best thing that could have happened, I think, happened. They basically kind of wrecked Trump. They validated DeSantis, and then they gave Biden, like, they took away Biden's ability to sort of blame a Republican-controlled Congress on like his failures, right? So he's now going to be set up to run in this next election, probably in the middle of a recession with nobody really to blame other than himself, no scapegoats, right? And then he may end up now having DeSantis to run again, right? So this is all lining up, I think, for like a very red 2024, 2028. I think that if you read like Twitter, like there are cracks in the Trumpers, right? Like a big one I noticed was this guy, Mike Cernovich. He was like pretty right wing, early, like very Trumpy guy, very vocal. And I noticed on his Twitter last night, he was basically like, fuck this guy. Like, what are we doing? Like, we liked him because he won. He's not a winner. Like, he's hurting us. And it was interesting going through his comments and seeing the Trump people kind of going at it. And I've observed this in my family too. Like a good chunk of my family is like very Trumpy. And they kind of like DeSantis. And they've never really liked another guy. I think DeSantis has done a good job of keeping some of like the punch you in the face culture war stuff, whereas like Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney were these kind of like milk toast, like cut your taxes. No, nobody cares about that. So I think he's like the next evolution. Like he took like the best of Trump and the best of Romney, which wasn't a lot, and then they mushed them together into this like better candidate. The last thing I'll say is like the biggest thing that jumped out at me that we haven't talked about yet was the data amongst Gen Z.
What did you find?
Gen Z is the youngins.
Yeah, 2-to-1 ratio of Democrat to Republican. And we have to keep in mind that in the 4 years that will pass from the next election, there's gonna be a lot of boomers who have, rest in peace, passed away, and a lot of Zoomers who have come to voting age. And they seem to be a little more motivated than some of the semi like loud, but kind of like apathetic at the polls, millennial type. So I think that the Republican Party, if they don't figure out how to get the young, this is just going to be like a horrible like kneecap for them going forward.
I always thought the best stance for a Republican president, if they wanted to win, which is it's impossible, it's probably impossible to take this stance, but is to be the whole fiscal conservative route. But anytime a social issue comes up, literally deny answering the question, say that is a state.
There's a state issue.
It's a state issue. As the president of the federal in charge of the federal government, it is irrelevant to the conversation. Like, let's move on to the next question. And he or she would have to say that 1,000 times.
I think they get slaughtered.
And they would probably get slaughtered. But
that's how I would run it. But
because their stance is literally on the other side of these Gen Z demographics on social issues for now, they should literally deny answering those questions until they come to grips with it. And they are pro-gay marriage. They are pro-abortion rights. Like, literally just say it doesn't. The president doesn't decide these things. The governors do.
So I have two follow-up questions that are somewhat related, but they're like kind of interesting. Like, okay, so one is like, we're talking about Biden's reign here, and like, inflation's running rampant. It's the economy's in shambles, whatever. Like, how much of this scenario do you ascribe to Joe Biden versus like, this is a normal economic cycle and he happened to be the administrator at this moment? Like that's part of how I feel about the presidency. It's like they don't actually contour the economy as much as we think they do. It's just like these things just happen to move in cycles, and then you're an administrator at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to say for like the economy is a lagging indicator of like the predecessors' actions.
Right, Biden wasn't the president during COVID when we were printing all this money.
He was the president when we printed like an additional $2 trillion, which some might argue was the straw that broke the camel's back.
But that
we certainly needed some stimulus.
He wasn't the one writing checks.
But on top of that was the infrastructure bill.
We didn't need that. Yeah, and he wanted to do more.
Right.
Let's keep that in mind.
And Joe
Manchin jumped on a grenade.
Well,
like, who knows where
both sides wanted to. I think both sides issued.
But Obama inherited
trillions of dollars.
The great
both
financial
sides
crisis.
wanted the first thing, which I think was legitimate. Like, we shut down the entire world. There were plenty of people waving their hands in the air like, whoa, what are you doing? We don't need another $2 trillion or whatever the hell.
I mean, Larry Summers.
Summers is
the most
notable.
notable.
He was basically taking his shirt off and waving it in the middle.
I forget
of
the
White
exact
House.
name of the title, but he was basically like chief economic advisor for Obama at some point. And he was the most notable person to be like, we do not need to spend this. Inflation is going to run rampant. And he was even arguing like, is the infrastructure bill going to be positive ROI? Like he was saying, if we're going to do this, it needs to provide a positive ROI. And he's still kind of in it outside the lane of like the Democratic Party and their policies. Okay. And he's been on point.
So my second question is actually about local elections. Like, cause we did vote. We voted here in California, and there was one notable one.
Which one did you?
Proposition 1.
Which one was that? Was that the tax, the over $2 million? Or?
No, that was about abortion. It was about birth.
Oh yeah, I mean, I voted yes. I was like, yeah, I want everyone to have the ability to.
So yeah, just to be clear, it was like the laws in California, as they currently stand, allow abortions, and this proposition was to constitutionalize that right.
Explicitly state in the California Constitution.
Right. And I think that was the one that was like pretty polarizing. Everything else was sort of like
yeah, I mean, like
economic and whatnot.
I think in our abortion episode, we talked about, whether we think abortion is appropriate, and also whether this Roe v. Wade, this in particular on a law, what do you call it? Like the basis of like its credentials on the law, did it stand and should it stand?
Right.
Just the specific case.
As ascribed by the 9 members of the Supreme Court versus kicking it to the states.
Right.
And I think that's where we were talking about the nuance.
Right. Because it's like, well, this law maybe doesn't, this decision on this case maybe doesn't stand on as strong legs as if Congress codified it into law. But like when it comes down to like, do I have the chance to vote? I would 100% vote for having as much flexibility for women to decide whether they should.
So that's exactly where I landed on it. I voted for women's rights. I'm on record on that podcast voting pro-choice. But like I didn't have an easy time voting for that. Like I am open-minded about all the things that we discussed on our pods. And like, I think
there were some interesting points that I hadn't thought of.
It's a very nuanced conversation. I just landed exactly where you did, where it's like, okay, so repealing Roe v. Wade, I'm actually cool with, because I'm okay with taking the power out of the hands of these non-elected individuals and pushing it to the people.
And I understand why that's legal credentials were on shaky ground.
Yeah, and then I just used my vote to vote for how I felt on that one. And like
there was another California specific one, which was like, do you want to tax people who have over $2 million of income, an extra 2% or 1.25%, I forget what it was.
Classic. Who's voting on that?
To I think the money was to...
Was that to fund music programs in schools?
No, that wasn't. It was deforestation. It was like to help prevent forest fires and climate. It was a climate change, essentially.
Oh yeah, it was actually to promote investment in electrical vehicle charging stations, and like the forest fires was an afterthought, but it was mostly to promote EV subsidies. On all of these economic issues, I essentially voted no on, because I'm not into raising California taxes even higher.
We're in the like single percentile of like, what your effective tax rate is in California. We have a budget surplus, like, the government should have enough money to prioritize what it needs to prioritize.
Yeah, we can talk about reallocating the current budget. Like, it's interesting because I was reading through the props with Mina, my wife. And as I read through them, like, she goes, oh yeah, there should be more funding for music and artist programs at schools. And I was like, okay, so what this actually means is that we will raise taxes to fund this. And she goes, oh, no higher taxes.
Very, very level one.
But I thought that one was a bond. I thought they were like, we're going to issue bonds.
So in any of these scenarios where it was like, we have to pay for these, she was like, oh, well, no.
I will say I did vote for every measure that was like, should we issue a bond for like the water system and like for arts? And I was like, yes, because I'm a buyer of municipal bonds.
You're a bond guy.
I love fucking 5% tax-free municipal bonds. Like, I hold them to maturity. I actually buy the individual municipal bonds. Like, you don't pay any taxes, state or federal, on them. So like, your effective pre-tax earnings are like 9%. If you're sitting in California, it's like fucking beautiful return. Anyway, I use it to borrow against as a degen. So I don't know how much credit you give that.
I feel like we should never have these propositions where people can like effectively vote themselves money. It's just always a bad idea.
There's literally no way that the Republican side ever wins that. It's just proposition.
It's like what we see in crypto with the DAOs, right? Where everybody just can vote to get, like, they just vote to take the money. Of course they do. It's like this like game theory problem, right? Like I think to direct democracy to like basically vote yourself a raise or vote yourself more stuff at the expense of other people's stuff is like it's a tricky absurd situation. I don't know if I like these propositions anyway. They're like so difficult. There's so many of them. They're so difficult for people to parse. They have these deceptive names that don't make any sense. It's just
we never look at the budget. What the fuck is going on with our spending?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just like, do you want more dogs?
Yeah, like you're not going to vote no.
Yeah, dogs are cool. And then you just find out that there's like some like 39-cent gas tax on it at the back end. You're like, wait, but I just said I like dogs. I didn't say I like more money.
There was another part of the ballot which I routinely do not vote on. And it's usually these judicial appointments. And like, should X and X name be appointed? And I'm like, I don't know this person.
Oh,
like,
that's funny. Because
like, where would I even find the information to understand if they should be...
So there's like 5 pages of these names, like superintendent of this county or whatever, like the waste management
I just skip
person.
those when I'm like, I don't know.
I voted on the governor, and that's it. And then I just went page.
So you're similar. You skip ones where you're like, I don't know.
I literally never heard of these names before.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Good.
So
I feel like that's the right answer.
Stupid.
If you're not informed, just fucking skip it.
It's so stupid. I feel like we've said this a few times, but like, why don't I just have a delegate? Like, I'm just like, I just researched the delegate one time, and I'm like, yeah, that guy thinks like me. Go vote for me on all this stuff. Research all the judges. do a little thing. And if I decide that like I don't like the crap you're voting on, I'll go get a new delegate. But then I'll just go back to my life. Like nobody can keep up with this
fixes
stuff.
this. Crypto fixes
I mean,
this.
I will
borrow
say
some
I
ideas
did
from
I
it.
did vote against even Democratic candidates for even things like Secretary of State or Board of Education, where I like believed in their policies, but I voted the opposite because I do think I want California to be more of an even keeled state in terms of like political party. And the only way that happens is that the data shows that California, every election leans more Republican, and that the surveys show that people lean more Republican, and then money goes to those Republican candidates, more money, so that they can actually combat and make it more of an equal playing field. So I did kind of vote kind of in that direction. I'm like, listen, Gavin Newsom is not going to face he's going to demolish the candidate. But like if I vote against him, then the data for the next election will hopefully show one tick, in the direction of a Republican candidate. And then maybe that future Republican candidate will get more money because someone looks at the data and like, you know what? This guy might actually have a chance. I'm going to back him so that there's an even playing
That's
field.
the only rational reason for voting, because no vote that I've ever seen has ever landed on a one vote difference. Because I've always thought like this is a waste of my time. But I show up I'm the first guy in the polling place just because I want to do my civic duty. But
Right.
it's like I know that I'm not making a goddamn difference.
But
I
you
know
want
I'm not.
you voted, you achieved your right to complain now.
Yeah, sure.
But Bill Clinton was on the record of saying, he's like, so you want this action? Well, then why don't you show up in the polls? Why don't you show up in the voting data? Like, why, if you say you want this, when my political operatives inform me of like what the polls and the data says, why don't you show up? And so I do think that in cases where you're going to lose, it still makes sense to vote, because like you need to show up in the data, which is a precursor to money being funded in that area.
I want to believe in what you're saying, but I do ultimately think that it's meaningless and fruitless, unfortunately.
Dude, Ronald Reagan was the governor of California at one point.
He was at one point, but it's over now. And I think I think what you can do that is impactful is voting with your feet. And I think like it makes actually more economic, rational sense to actually just move to places where that place like is in line with what you want versus like trying to change the place that.
Well, I don't
you're
want you to
in,
move.
You know?
But here, I mean, here's a good question. This is what I've thought about. Like,
I don't want to move either, but I'm also not going to be able to
if
do
you're
anything about this.
if you're a high earner in California, your marginal dollar is taxed around 50%.
More than that.
So
I've paid.
there's
paid
13
60
point-
some years.
Self-employed,
It's like
and then
insane.
you tack on an extra 15.
Absolutely.
It's 13.3%
ludicrous.
is the max in California plus the federal max. I mean, you're well over.
Isn't it
50.
16 now?
Oh, I don't.
13.3 California plus federal plus self-employment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm thinking.
is there a dollar threshold on your marginal dollar that you would be like, fuck this, like I'm moving?
Yeah.
But
of
what is
course.
that? Like I don't know what that is.
I don't know, but the more they squeeze, the more it fucking becomes real.
Or is it one of those, you're a frog in a boiling pot and the
Sort of.
water
It's
is boiling
sort of
very
Definitely-
slowly?
It's definitely that.
It's definitely that,
It's
but like
definitely
I
that,
don't
yeah.
think that the voters realize that fucking the taxpayers will leave if you keep fucking squeezing.
Or they are leaving.
I mean, they already are.
To play devil's advocate, I think a lot of people don't leave because there actually are like tangible economic benefits to being in California that maybe we don't think about because we're always focused on the tax rate.
What are
And, like,
some of
the-
those?
Well, homie
Like
likes
for-
to play pickleball Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, like
He doesn't like to exercise Monday to Friday.
I mean, weather is an obvious one, but like also just like the network and opportunity of having like Silicon Valley or like like there is actual like real value to being around those particular networks.
proximity is like power type of thing.
Yeah, and I want to caution against just being like it's just like taxes and we're just like there are benefits to being here. There's also kind of like more esoteric stuff like. My house is probably just going to go up in value a lot because the government is just so bad at creating new housing supply.
But it's
So
the best
like,
NFT you've purchased.
so in a way, they're like sort of making wealthy people wealthier, and then just trying to claw some of that back, and this kind of weird thing. And obviously, the system shouldn't be built that way in the first place.
but here.
But
we
I
are.
can see some arguments for it.
I mean, part of me is like, well, just make more money. Like when I tell myself, I'm like, well, just make more money, idiot. Like just work harder. But at the same time,
All right, thank you. Let's call it there.
Simple.
It's not simple. It
Make
never
more
works out
money,
that way.
idiots. All right, you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, guys. Well, let's wrap it there.
Hope all you listeners made it to that
Alfalfa
extremely
draw.
sick drop from Nick.
I don't know if you guys like these like in-depth politics episodes, but if you do, let us know. We try to focus more on the policy part, which I think is more. I think it's more important than politics. But sometimes
Thank you
we got
guys.
to dig in.
I actually needed this because I did not DMOR. I did not do my own research. So thank you for doing that for me. Thank you.
Cool.
That's why the algo's here. All right.
All right. Love you guys. Bye. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.